All right, good day, everyone. It's about 12 noon out east. We got 9 a.m. out on the West Coast, and we appreciate your joining us today for Terazo plus Twilio's Roundtable event, What We Learned at Signal 2021. Again, as a minor housekeeping note, the event is being recorded, and we'll be happy to provide a link to that recording along with any other associated materials in a follow-up email that you will receive from terazo.com. My name is Gilberto Velasquez Jr., Director of Channel Partner Marketing here at Terazo, coming at you live from Houston, Texas, the crown jewel of the Gulf Coast. I'd like to do a quick note of thanks to all of our Twilio and Terazo team members who made today's roundtable event possible. And on that note, I will soon be turning it over to Chris Bussey, our Chief Digital Officer at Terazo. Mr. Bussey will be introducing all of the panel, Twilio co-moderators, Twilio members, Terazo members included. So with no further ado, and again, reminder folks, this is being recorded. Let me turn it over to Mr. Chris Bussey.
Thank you very much, Gilberto. Appreciate the warm words of introduction, and welcome everybody to our Signal 2021, our post-Signal 2021 roundtable discussion. I'm Chief Digital Officer here at Terazo. Excited to talk to you about what myself and my colleague Amy, who you'll meet in a moment, learned at Signal at the Creator Summit in San Francisco, and what some of the other folks learned at Signal for the whole event. I'll go ahead and pass the baton to Christopher Alayinka from Twilio and let him introduce himself and the Twilio side.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the warm welcomes there. Hi, everyone. I'm Chris Alayinka. I manage the Terazo relationship for Twilio. We're very excited to have everyone here on the call today listening in. We have a very riveting round of conversations planned, and I really can't wait to get plugged in and started. With that, I believe I will hand the baton off to Mr. Rob Page.
Thanks, Christopher. My name is Rob Page. I lead the solutions engineering team for verticals, and I'm delighted to be here to share what everyone learned at Signal.
Mr. Dan Morris.
Thank you, Christopher. Dan Morrison. I'm a member of our Mid-Atlantic team. I'm a account executive here and customer experience designer. So we do a lot of great work with Terazo and excited for this conversation.
All right. I believe that was our team from Twilio.
Excellent. Thank you, Rob, Dan, Chris, for joining us today. I'm going to pass the baton to Mike Blakeney from Terazo.
Thanks, Chris. I'm Mike Blakeney from Terazo as Senior Solution Architect. Really excited to talk about the great things that are coming out of Studio from engineering and being able to architect great solutions.
And we've got Amy Mungo, our Chief Strategy Officer.
Great, thanks, Chris. Amy Mungo, Chief Strategy Officer with Terazo. I was lucky enough to be out in San Francisco at Signal with Chris and many others. So really excited to share, hopefully collectively, where we see the trends leading us and what innovations we're hopefully going to bring together to the marketplace to drive the trends coming out maybe next year. Thanks.
Yeah, super excited. And you'll see Trevor and Miles and Gilberto from the team on. They're just helping us moderate today's events. Gilberto or Trevor, you want to jump in and just let folks know how they can post Q&A if anybody has questions that the panelists can address throughout the course of this roundtable discussion?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Chris. We're going to be having the Q&A open, so you folks can go ahead and post your questions in there. Chat's open too. Both myself and Trevor will be happy to moderate that out. And if we see anything, we can push that out. Or of course, if any of our panelists or co-moderator see something that they immediately want to jump out, they can, but we'll be happy to make sure that that gets pushed out to the team as a whole. So feel free. Remember, everybody, this is an engaging and interactive roundtable event. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah. So I've got a question I'd like to start off with, but first, Chris A., I want to check and see if you had any other opening remarks or if you had a burning question that you wanted to ask the panelists first.
I think I just simply want to echo and share the sentiments that have already been expressed here, that, you know, we had a very productive session at Signal, Creator Summit, fantastic learnings, and the opportunity really did shed a light on the opportunity ahead of us, and really can't wait to dive into this conversation to really share some of what we picked up from that event with everyone here, and begin to express how we move forward and win together.
Excellent, thank you. So this first question, just to kick things off, I think for Rob or Dan, coming into a big event like the Twilio SIGNAL 2021 event, which is the big marquee annual conference for Twilio, for their customers, for their partners like Terazo. I think it's important, before we even dig into what we learned at SIGNAL, to talk a little bit about, like, coming out of 2020, leading into 2021, what kind of wins was Twilio getting with the product suite, the customers, kind of the typical use cases you saw, I think, especially in the contact center and the omni-channel messaging, because I think that'll help set the groundwork for then talking about or contextualizing what we saw released at SIGNAL and we're excited to take forward. So Dan or Rob, do you want to kind of set the stage for us here a little bit heading into SIGNAL?
Dan, why don't you go first?
All right. Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think, we still see continued momentum building on core products. Like you said, Chris, I think we just continue to see that kind of organic growth happening on the SMS, the messaging channels, voice channels, et cetera. And I'm going to totally steal a Rob Page metaphor here is, I love to think of Twilio as Legos, right? And so we're literally lit communications and engagement Legos that companies and brands can snap together in order to deliver the customer experience and engage with their customers. And so I think that, we kind of came into 2021 and then, with Flex then there's Flex, and Flex is really just snapping a lot of our Legos together in a way so that our, developers and customers don't have to do that by themselves, and kind of like pre-snaps the Millennium Falcon together, right? So now there's this call center, contact center capability. And then what I get really excited about is someone who gets to go out and, talk to our customers every day and kind of help solve their problems with the Twilio Legos, is how the Twilio and the Flex and now the segment Legos are all snapping together into Twilio Engage. So it truly is like a solid single holistic platform. As you first, it kind of started with communications, and then we add Flex, and it really gets into kind of like customer contact, customer experience, and now the data pieces with segment are just coming into place, and that's just where it's going to be really, really powerful. So Rob, what's your thoughts on that?
Totally agree. I would say one of the interesting trends I see in particularly the Twilio product mix is, and it may sound trite, but democratizing customer service. It used to be there were a ton of inbound calls into a contact center, and now with conversations and off-label applications of Flex, anybody at your company that has customer contact can at any moment be included into the contact center. And I think that's going to transform how customer service is provided.
No, I think those are both great examples. And I think, just to let everybody have a chance to talk kind of as what we've seen in 2021 here, Mike Blakeney, what kind of use cases have you seen us working with this year that have been, interesting or might have some broader relevance for the audience?
Yeah, so I think what we've seen quite a bit of work around Flex and just getting onboarded onto Flex, and around several areas. One is taking advantage of all the different channels of conversations. Customers don't just come in over a voice call or come over SMS. They want to communicate right there off your website. They want to talk to you over Facebook. They want to talk to you over WhatsApp. And using Flex to funnel all that to the right customer support person at the right time is really, really been something we've seen a lot of. The other aspect of it is we've seen a lot of work around engaging with the customer beforehand to kind of pre-screen, gather some information, or maybe even be able to answer their requests before it even hits. It has to go to a customer support rep. And we've seen that take the form of really simple, like menu-driven type approaches, all the way down to sophisticated, natural language bots.
Excellent, excellent. And Amy, I know you're relatively new to the team. You kind of jumped into the deep end of the pool with both feet there, heading out to San Francisco for the Creator Summit. Heading into that, before you actually went to the Creator Summit, what were the things that were really on your radar that you were curious about as you approached the event there with the Creator Summit and Signal?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what was on my mind and continues to be on my mind is this surrounding the customer, right? With those right messages, the right help, the right contact, the right availability when that customer needs it. And I think everything we learned at Signal and the Creator Summit, we are getting cozier with the customer in a non-intrusive, more personalized way. So if we learned anything from 2021, not only did we accelerate digitally, but the customer's expectations also accelerated. They got past the digital divide, right, of this. Now this is the first point of contact for them. And now that we've broken down that wall of whatever it may have been, concern or, I don't worry, I have no idea. They want to have more personalized, on-demand experiences, communication, problem-solving partnerships. And I'm really, really excited for where we're going as a technology community, but where we're going to help each other out, like even in terms of like humanity too. I think it's a really exciting time we're in.
Chris, can I hook onto that real quick? Because I think
Absolutely.
it touches on such a great point. I think, Rob and I actually had a startup back in the day, and we literally obsessed over this idea of that a lot of people obsess over is the right message at the right time on the right device via the right channel is valuable content, right? And I think that's always been the holy grail of, marketers. It's been the holy grail of customer experience designers, but there's always been this gap and this struggle between, hey, we have all the right channels, but we don't have the data to know what our customers actually want and need at this point in the customer experience. Or, man, we have a data lake and we're swimming in data, right? And you're like, we have all the data we need, but it's not stitched together and it's not actually giving us insights and intelligence to really know what this customer really wants at this point in the customer journey. And I think what we're going to talk a little bit about today, and where I came fired up about Twilio and Signal and Segment coming out, is that we kind of closed the gap on that. And like, I think that's the future of Twilio. I think that's going to be the future of the market.
Right. Yeah. If I can jump in here with a comment on this. We talked about the democratization of customer information. The way I like to think about it is across 3 Ds. We have data, we have those decision points, and the customer being able to own those decision points. And then we'll talk about the delivery, the ownership of delivery. How is that data being delivered to the end customer? So 3 Ds, we all recognize this is a data problem that we're solving to. But the 3 Ds really does help to encapsulate the essence of Twilio Engage and what the true offering is for us. That's one takeaway that I had. And I really want, on this course, I would like us to spend a little more time around what does the democratization of data, what does that really truly mean? I know our CEO referred to this as, open up the kimono to the big, small, the large, to really drive personalization. But if we can have a little conversation, and perhaps I'll punt it over to Amy, around what does democratization of data, what does that truly mean?
I mean, I'm but one of many informed opinions, but what I think, especially in the business that we service together, right? We service a lot of enterprise and middle market and growth companies that maybe don't have large, sophisticated data and analytics, API-driven infrastructures and teams. What we're able to do now is bring all of that accessibility, the learning, the machine learning and the AI behind insights and data-driven information to companies large and small, to entrepreneurs, to small business owners, to middle market. You know, I come out of healthcare and financial services, and I think about what accessibility we're able to drive into those middle market customers. And I get really excited about that democratization of that data. Big institutions, big banks, big tech companies, they can hire the people to do all this, to run it. They can build APIs, they can troubleshoot, they can manage the back ends 24/7. The middle market or emerging enterprise orgs can't do that. They don't have the bandwidth to handle that sort of intake. But with this, putting the tools in that middle frame for these companies allows them to service their customers more in that one-to-one, that cozier connection that I mentioned before. I think that is what I get excited about, democratizing data. And then I also think about how it services the end user, you, me, all of us on this. I think about, you know, people in, you know, different types of communities being able to be surrounded by information that matters to them, where they can get answers to questions they have sooner. And I think that's breaking down walls for all people.
I think that's a perfect answer there. And Chris, that's a perfect lead into, you know, I think we saw a number of awesome announcements too. We're going to explore during this conversation was around the Twilio Intelligence product announcement, and then the Twilio Engage product announcement, both of which are very focused on data and looking at data and using it more broadly, using it in an empowering way, both very differently. And I think especially as we come back around to the Twilio Engage discussion, we'll talk even more about the democratization there. Chris, do you want to tee up a little bit around Twilio Intelligence? So, you know Chris or Rob and Dan, and what we saw and how we see that extending Flex. So we kind of talk through that a little bit, and then segue into the Twilio Engage and get into the CDP and the use of data there.
Sure. Rob, do you want to go? Chris, I'm happy to
Please,
jump in.
yes, please jump right in.
Yeah, I think, you know, what's interesting to me with intelligence is the fact that text has always been easy, right? You have the text, and like then you can kind of run that through machine learning and, you know, AI, and you can kind of figure out intents and all of those other things related to it. But with intelligence, like especially voice intelligence, now it's literally kind of bringing together kind of advanced transcription and then kind of AI by which to then bring voice into that data set, by which then you can then learn all the things you want to learn about what's happening, kind of what your customers want.
Can you take it from the top a little bit? Because there may be people on the, you know, listening in that don't know what the Twilio Intelligence product does, what it kind of extends and adds to Flex. So what's kind of the 30-second kind of user journey oriented or enterprise use case oriented pitch there for intelligence and what it brings that was not present in the Flex suite previously?
Rob, you want to take that?
Sure. The idea is that in real time, people are having conversations with people and bots and systems, and those conversations exhibit a certain structure. If you're asking for a service appointment from your lawn care company, you may say something like, I would like my lawn fertilized on Saturday at 8 and stay away from the flower beds. And that with natural language processing and natural language understanding, the data that's in that expression, that utterance, can be pulled out, and then you can at least analyze it and ideally tailor an experience for someone who's calling in for a new lawn fertilization appointment. The ability to do that at scale without having to learn natural language processing, which is a PhD in its own right, brings a lot of value. It allows companies that are way below the fold to compete and develop customer experiences that are competitive with the Amazons and Microsofts and Macy's of the world.
Yeah, I think you hit on a good note there, right? How to do it at scale. And then I think one thing that maybe people that haven't approached one of these before is like the appreciation for how intelligence does voice transcription. So maybe talk a little bit even about, we know there's the web chat, there's SMS, how even applying machine learning to that was perhaps simpler, and just what kind of the breakthrough that intelligence with voice transcription at scale brings that really wasn't present before.
Right. So before some of these product announcements, it was relatively easy to take a voice recording and run it through voice rec and get a transcript, but it can't affect the current interaction because you have to bring a lot of compute, a lot of parallel compute to bear. Throw them a bone, Chris. And now by bringing a lot of compute to bear, you can actually take into account, I would like you to avoid my flower bed. That is a real-time expression that can be pulled out, and the customer experience can be adapted in near real time to that utterance. That's a pretty big deal. So you're not doing analysis on the things your customers say post facto. You're doing it a couple moments after they say it, and that's pretty different. Does that respond to your question?
I think that's good. I think that what I saw is the ability to bring action to the data, right? To understand even what are perhaps those kind of common use cases and analyze and see then when we see these use cases in the contact center, what to do with that data so that we can understand it. And even what impressed me too was some of the auditability. I've done contact center work where you had to have what they called the mini Miranda. And so this was in a collections context, and you had to have that for, depending on the state, depending on if the person was in the armed services, whether they were deployed or not, when you're collecting on like a credit card debt. And just being able to track all of that in a contact center can be difficult. And that's one of the things that I also saw was interesting with Twilio Intelligence, was the ability to not only interpret and action the conversation from a direct customer experience perspective, but also from the things that are important to the enterprise, kind of across the business function of what is this call center doing, what's important from a QA, audit that from voice, but then also be able to task things. One of the interesting use cases that I saw was detecting when perhaps somebody was canceling their account because of a better competitive offer, and being able to, even if the call center or contact center agent did not pick up on that or make the offer, that the transcription analysis then kicks off an SMS that goes right to that customer. Obviously, they've opted in to receive those kind of messages at some point, but it kicks that right off with a discount and a link. So, hey, 15% off if you stay with the link. And I just thought that was a really interesting use case to some of the things you think about in a contact center, like retention and renewal, the ability to add the intelligence to really kind of sweeten up those use cases there. I know Mike Blakeney from Terazo here. I think there is other work that we do, that we've done, that we're doing in the natural language processing space on voice channels as well, that I think are very complementary, more in like the kind of upfront interactive voice response or IVR perspective. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the work we've seen, and then how Twilio Intelligence can play into that in kind of a cohesive or complementary way?
Yeah, I think it's really similar to what you're all discussing around the real time when I'm talking with a customer support rep, or even quickly after a call, right? That time is of the essence if someone's thinking about canceling their account, or they're even calling to get a quote from you, right? And so one of the things that we've looked at and talked about is using something like Engage to count, hey, they've tried to call through this IVR, or they've tried to interact with us 5, 6, 7 times, and they just haven't gotten what they wanted, and then kicking off something within Engage to actually follow back up with them, or even sending an activity to our contact center to be able to pick up the phone, call the customer, and say, hey, look, I see you've checked your credit on your account multiple times in the last couple of months. Is there something I can help you with? I've seen you've tried to get help get an answer through our IVR. It doesn't seem like you've been able to find what you're looking for. How can I help you? A lot of it is using those data signals to be proactive and targeted, I think, in the customers that you're engaging with.
I think that's good, and I think you really set up then a nice segue into the next section. I want to check in with Amy and the other panelists before we kind of segue into then Twilio Engage and really talk about the Twilio acquisition of Segment and how it has really been activated in a way through Twilio Engage. But just, Amy, did you have any other thoughts on the Twilio intelligence, audio text transcription aspect of things there?
I'm good for now. I'm going to save my thoughts for the next section, if that's all right.
Excellent, excellent. Well, Chris, I'll pass the baton back to you here.
For me, a very quick observation from the last point that Mike made there, the fact that IVR perhaps enables a reactive engagement with the customer, whereas, as we begin to dig into Engage, it enables proactive engagement with the customer. That's a very subtle, nuanced difference there, but I think it's one worthy of being pointed out.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump on the IVR bandwagon here too. I think we're in the moment of an IVR makeover, right? In the sense of IVRs have always been these ridiculously frustrating, just anger, like raising your temperature moments usually, right? And so now with intelligence and the ability to use AI and machine learning and all of these things and bring the data to bear, it's going to allow customers to actually get their questions answered potentially without having to go to the call center, which is really expensive. So how can, I think the modern IVR, the modern intelligent IVR you can build with, Twilio and some other tools is going to deflect a lot of calls, save a lot of costs, and then allow the most important calls to get to the contact center. And I think that's critical.
I think you nailed it right there, right? Like the IVR makeover, I love that. I want to adopt that term. I was actually thinking yesterday, just, if we could just tweet anything we wanted, right? For our own marketing rights, like Terazo plus Twilio, we can build IVR systems that don't send your customer into a blind rage at you because they actually understand the customer in the way that the customer wants to speak. And I think that's just another form of democratization of data, right? Is meeting the customer and letting the customer speak to you in the way that's natural for them, instead of having to conform their language patterns and things like that into this taxonomy that you've created as an enterprise. So Chris, I know like the next topic, and this is really, I think, going back to your 3Ds here, right, is the Twilio Engage, which really was Twilio Segment with additional features added on top. You want to kick us off and maybe ask a couple questions of Rob and Dan and the group here to kind of drive down that 3Ds and how it relates to Segment and Engage?
Right, I was on mute there. My little dog was barking in the background. The way I would like to drive that conversation is perhaps to ask the question of the team. What is the superpower that Terazo brings to bear in engaging a customer and to truly understand their journey to digitization, to truly understand, to tease out, what really is the pain that they're looking to solve for? How does Terazo go about, really engaging the customer and helping them digitize on platforms like Engage?
Amy, do you want to take that question?
I was actually hoping that we could start with some engineering gusto first to like introduce it. So can we go from like the back end to the front end? Is that all right?
I'm gonna bull myself in right here, and I'm gonna give the 30-second Twilio response.
Go for it, Dan.
Is like, we hear problems that customers have, right? And then they're like, hey, and then we kind of help on the solution. You know, I think Terazo's the dream makers, right? You guys are actually can take things from here is the problem, here's a high level concept, right? But there's a lot of times when like, you know, Twilio's like, hey, we got some APIs and, you know, some, you know, coding that you need to do to plug all this stuff together and make it work. You guys actually, you don't just make it work, you actually help in the concept formation, the dream formation, and then make things reality. So I think that's why I love the partnership here.
Okay, well, since Dan started that, I'll jump into it. You know, part of being able to make dreams come true is to be outcome focused. And I think that's part of our sweet spot, right? So when we approach a potential customer together, we are that integration partner. But as soon as we start that conversation between Twilio, Terazo, and said customer, we start talking about what are their dreams, what are the outcomes, the KPIs they are in search of, and how might we look at that strategically and come up with one or two paths to get them there. So it's just not a strict plug and play. We bring human insight, we bring our collective intelligence, we all bring years of experience to this, right? And we really hope that customer envision outcomes that may have even been more enlightened than they originally started off with. And that's the part, like, I get really excited when I see our teams delivering that together, because a lot of times we discover something that we didn't even see in the first 2 or 3 meetings with the client.
Yeah. Help, and maybe Mike Blakeney, maybe you can help make that tangible for us, because you're in on a lot of those early meetings with clients as part of our solutions architecture group, really taking in requirements, really I should say developing requirements, right? Because a lot of times it's a problem or an opportunity that's stated to us. And I always like to say a lot of what Terazo does is we help paint the picture of an end-to-end enterprise solution that includes Twilio products as a key part of that solution. So maybe take us through the kind of questions, the kind of new thought we help bring, and even as it gets down almost to a component level there when we're engaging a new customer opportunity there.
Yeah, so what I like about Terazo is we take all of those concepts and we fold it into how we approach our engineering. And it really looks more of understanding what those outcomes are before we even begin talking about the technology selections. We might know we're going to use Twilio, but we're not just going to go plug Twilio in somewhere and call it a day. We're going to look at it and evaluate and gather those requirements that you're looking for from a business perspective to make sure that the solution we build is going to run smoothly, it's going to scale to your needs, and it's going to accomplish the outcome you're looking for. Because at the end of the day, a solution is just trying to make a better tomorrow, right? There's some pain point, there's something about today that we don't agree with, we don't particularly like, and we're trying to fix it for the next day. And so from engineering, a lot of our questions and focus in those initial conversations are more along the lines of what is your desired user experience? What kind of flow would you like to see out of this? And then we begin to layer in the technology to support that rather than the technology being at the forefront.
Right. I think in some ways the Terazo team here has also been very, very, very modest. You know, our customers are very smart and very savvy. And when they bring an SI in, they've given it some thought invariably to what it is they want and how they will go about approaching the problems that they have. But I think the partners and the technology vendors that win the day are those who bring unexpected value, you know, and help the client or customer really think through, you know, yes, the pain problems that is obvious, but also take it in a new dimension in such ways that they haven't actually thought about. and bringing in emerging technologies and driving innovation and co-creating those solutions with them, to the point that you get to a solution that they hadn't really talked about or thought about, as you referred to, Amy. And that's what I like to refer to as unexpected value. The surprises. Oh wow, Terazo brought me this. We hadn't actually thought about that. Isn't this fantastic? And I think that's a lot of what Terazo does, and does very well. Oftentimes, we engage initially on an opportunity that we think, or the customer thinks, is a flex opportunity. It's a contact center opportunity. But by the time Terazo's actually gone in and applied your magic, the customer realizes it's frontline plus flex. Right? I mean, that is you driving unexpected value. So let's not be modest here. All right.
Well, thank you so much, Chris, for the kind words there.
We take our modesty very seriously.
Yes, but I think I like that the unexpected value, right? Because that's certainly something I think we seek to surface as we come into these different use cases, but also these solutions just lend themselves, I think, to surfacing the unexpected value, especially when it comes to like the democratization of data. And I know one of the things that we've seen as a huge opportunity lately that's really coincided, I think, with Segment and Engage. And one of the things driving this is the shift from cookies and third-party data to enterprises wanting to have their own first-party data, which is really what a customer data platform, or CDP, which is the class of product that Segment falls into, really helps enterprises solve for and drive to those unexpected realizations, outcomes, and value. So Dan, I don't know, maybe if you could help us understand just kind of like the current, it's almost a technology marketing regulatory environment we're in around the shift from third-party data to first-party data, and how this is good for enterprises and brands, and actually is also good for the consumer, I think, in many ways, because of some of the issues that do happen with cookies and things like that.
Yeah, no, we're at another pivot point here with that as well. And I think with GDPR and things that started a few years back, kind of kick this all off. Rob and I talk a lot about whether or not customers really are worried about their data. Everyone will say they're worried about their data, and then they'll give it away for free and like sign up for everything. And but regulation, I think, is kind of making that kind of more real. We're moving. So to take a step back, we just came out of an era where really brands and companies outsourced their data, right, and kind of out to others, right, and became very dependent on third-party data that was out of their control. They had to go get it from somewhere else, and so they, in a way, they were kind of a little lax in their first-party data, because they were like, oh well, great, we can go out and get this from someone else. They can stitch all that data together, and we can then action on it and have great ad targeting, et cetera, right? But as you kind of saw, Apple, both Apple and Google are the ones that are kind of moving the market here, right? So I think Safari and actually Firefox took cookies off, a couple years ago, right? So Google's actually late to the game here, but now Google's kind of on that bandwagon, and since they kind of own the search market, it's making a big impact. So they're like, no more cookies, right? And so, and then Apple's saying, great, with apps, like we are now forcing people to say whether or not they will allow app tracking across different apps, right? And so now everyone's kind of wondering, like, oh my gosh, like, I'm not going to have this third-party data anymore. And what's happening is people are kind of going back to being like, wait a minute, we have a ton of data. We just haven't really been experts in actually leveraging that data and stitching our own data together. And, first-party cookies are going to stay on Google and all the search engines and everything. So it's like, that's all still there for your first-party data. And so in a way, it's a race to figure out like who is going to be able to leverage the power of their first-party data, which people still have a lot of, in order to then kind of win in the market. And, I'm not, third-party data is not going away. And I think, Google is kind of, it's a little bit of smoke and mirrors around what they're doing with Flock and FLOC, or however you pronounce it. But it's really the rise of first-party data that's exciting. And I think that's right where the segment acquisition kind of flows right into what Twilio Engage is going to allow in the future. But I'll let some of my other colleagues kind of talk about that.
Yeah, perhaps a bit too soon, but I'll jump right in and say, multiple sources of data. That begs the question, how are we driving governance around the multiple sources? How are we ensuring that we're doing the right thing at the right time for our customers? And, as business, and we do know that our enterprise customers will invariably keep some of their data on premise. Not every piece of data is going to flow from on-prem to the cloud. So we end up with an environment that is multi-cloud. It's a hybrid cloud environment. The management of that data and the governance around that data becomes a key question in any customer's journey to become a digital platform. And this is, again, where I believe Terazo plays very nicely around DevOps. And I'll let Chris jump right in, or any of the other panelists talk about your chops and your superpowers around DevOps. And I think that's, a key differentiator for Terazo, more so as we move into the era of really harnessing data to delight the customer.
Yeah, and I think thank you, Chris. I think the DevOps is something we've had in our DNA since day one of starting this company. And Mike Blakeney and I and Amy, we actually did a lot of time all last week just thinking about data governance. So it's actually very fresh on our minds for a big project that we were working on. Mike, do you want to talk a little bit about our approach to data governance and DevOps kind of around all this? How do we help almost that meta layer around the solution and that supports the solution to help both runtime quality, operational quality, build quality, but then the data quality, because to Dan's point and Chris's point, the stitching it all together also has to happen in all this. So maybe paint a picture for us there, Mike.
Yeah, so I think when we're looking at DevOps and how it impacts the data, there's several areas where it touches on. I think the first is in the actual development. We think usually when we think about DevOps, we think of deployment pipelines. We think about automating builds and pushing things out, and that's certainly a critical part of your life cycle in software. But the other component is I think also in that auditability, and so using automation to monitor and collect where data is going, how it's getting there, ensuring the quality of that data. We have a lot of data, but it needs to be quality data, right? And then I think another element of it is actually in the utilizing a lot of the automations that you have available for bringing data in. So we have the actual building out of these pipelines and building out of our applications. We have the aspects around just transparency and insight into the quality of that data, and then we also have the parts around the automation of ingesting and making that data available to the right people.
It should even make this a little even more tangible, right? So Dan mentioned GDPR, right? So here's an example. Data lineage matters, right? Data governance matters when it comes to the right to be forgotten. As we talk about these, contact center contexts that are multi-channel and have, n number of use cases as we're discovering new ones as this data gets democratized both within organizations and how it creates new customer journeys. Talk a little bit about how do we ensure that, how does this all stitch together there to make that kind of thing happen?
Yeah, so when we're building out a tool and we're looking at data lineage, usually the the term is thrown around a lot and it has a lot of different meanings, but for us at Terazo, when we use a word like data hub, it's a tool that's used to track that lineage. And by lineage, we mean how that data changes over time, and being able to put rules and policies at a centralized location for that data, so that you're able to enforce that governance and enforce that auditability, and also, and in terms of the lineage, is the quality of the data.
As we think about that central hub, and maybe Rob Page, if you want to jump in on this one or pass it to Dan, I think one of the things that while CDP, customer data platform, may be newer to many enterprises, CRM, customer contact relationship management, has been around for a long time. In fact, that's a lot of what started the SaaS revolution and things like that. How do the two, like when Twilio is positioning the two, how do you see positioning the CDP with the CRM and then the contact center around that, and kind of the interaction between those big core platform pieces from a data perspective there?
I think generally CRMs are a great B2B tool. Because the data is manipulated and updated manually. But if I'm Nordstrom's and I have 250,000 shoppers a day, I'm not typing anything about their interactions. I'm tracking them through POS systems. I may have some web logins, and I need to correlate it so that at just the right time, I offer them a tie as opposed to a bathing suit. And so in my mind, I see CRMs being updated through keyboards and CDPs being updated through feeds. And I think it's a fan out issue. If you imagine yourself with so many customers that you can't imagine having an AE in charge of typing in updates that control or affect that customer's experience, then you need to click on CDP on Wikipedia right quick, because the rest of the world is getting there. An example that comes to mind from my earlier example about lawn care, if you put in a weather feed into your lawn care CDP, you should be able to go outbound with a call saying, hey, Chris, would you like to delay your fertilizer appointment a week, as opposed to waiting for me to do it? Or worse, getting me irritated that you went ahead and did it, even though it was going to be rainy.
And in the theme then of going outbound with the call, with Twilio Engage, kind of the theme of what we learned at Signal and what we're excited about going forward. Rob, can you speak a little bit, or maybe Dan, about the Twilio Engage and how it starts to make all that data that we're stitching together actionable in that regard?
Dan?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way I think about it is that segment and engage, CDP in just general is an intelligent platform, right? A data warehouse, for example, is just a bunch of data sitting somewhere, right? A CDP is going to basically take all the flows of, from all the different systems and all the different sources and stitch that data together and say, Rob Page is a gardener, or and he's a finicky, curmudgeon-y gardener. That's the segment that he's in. That's his persona, right? And so, and it's also going to be able to say, oh, interesting. We also know that he was snooping around, the Home Depot site, for mulch or whatever like that, right? So it's going to have all of that data. So now when you snap in on top of segment, all of the Twilio APIs and communication and engagement APIs, now you're like, oh, he's also really, really old, and he only reads email and doesn't know how to use text. So we're going to send him an email, not a text, because email is his channel of choice, right? And this is the message that he needs to get. So I think that's the power of when you bring these two things together. It gives you the right message at the right time in the customer journey via the right channel to then help Rob, to help move Rob along the customer journey for what he's trying to achieve.
Let me tag on one last thing. Wouldn't it be great if we never heard the following when we dialed into an IVR ever again. Please listen carefully because our options have changed. You should be able to predict if you have quality first-party data. Today should be the last time you ever hear that, because you should be able to have machine learning models that predict customer intent and dynamically adapt the IVR tree so that we never have to hear that nasty preface again.
Or ask me what language I speak. You should know that.
I think that's very helpful to paint a picture. And I think, in the time that we have left here to the top of the hour, I'll make another call for Q&A and questions. And I think we want to talk a little bit about, I'm an enterprise, I'm a customer, right, or a potential customer. How do I approach this? How do I break down this problem? How do I look at these components? And how do I really then look at creating this journey and this engagement on that long-term scale? Amy, I don't know if you have any thoughts on maybe use cases we might want to bandy about as one here to just to kind of use as a straw man to discuss that approach.
Yeah, I'm kind of wondering where exactly you're headed with this, but I think in terms of customer journeys, preferences, and insights, and one thing for all laypersons out there like myself and all of this technical speak, what I'm most excited about when we think about segment and then engage, right? I grew up I was trained as a human-centered designer. I was in the tough business of human insight development with product teams. And now, because of all of these tools, we are able to develop data-driven insights that are probably hundreds times closer to the customer than me and my teams were able to do just 10 years ago, with the big whiteboards and all the interviews. That's why I think it gets really exciting. I think we're creating this sort of like a woke and empowered stage for customer experience designers and marketers. And when we can put all that at their fingertips and we're enabling stronger customer experiences for all of us out there, more meaningful interactions, so we spend less time telling the IVR what language we speak and more time with our kids, to me, that's a really great path for us to be on. But I think it all, we're really, really, really dissecting, but at the same time, packaging up the customer journey and understanding them from every sort of dimension that we have sight into. And I'm trying to think of a use case. I think about the acceleration that financial institutions had to go through during the pandemic, right? Many of them leapfrogged 15 years in the future. Forget about 10 years. The big boys went 10 years. The middle market had to go 15 to 20. People had to have access to their funds. We couldn't have a run on banks. People needed to know their funds were there. They needed to be able to deposit checks. They needed to be able to create new accounts because a lot of people decided to leave the country and go to the islands for a while. I get it. I'm jealous. But we had to enable that in a digital only way. Branches were closed. To get an appointment in a branch was 3 weeks out. Some people didn't have 3 weeks for whatever they were trying to mobilize. And when we think about that sort of acceleration and understanding one person's particular customer journey and extrapolating that to larger insights and then distilling it back down to smaller customer groups, I think that there was just such a point for us as technologists, as experienced designers. And now that all these other tools are coming forward and we're putting all that accessibility again into the hands of so many more of us, that's an exciting journey to be on. Sorry, I kind of waxed into a use case there, Chris. I get very passionate about this. So I will let you pick on someone else right now because I could go for the next 3 hours.
No, I think that's great. And I think, Chris, from the Twilio side there, you mentioned earlier about the on-premises data, right? And the cloud data. I know you have a pretty informed perspective there of enterprises looking at even some of these products as their foray into cloud, or maybe the new capabilities they get with these products as the impetus for taking things that are on premises and going into the cloud, or stitching into a hybrid model. Can you talk a little bit more about how enterprises might be thinking about approaching those challenges?
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of investment has gone into on-prem in the trillions of dollars. Truly, I don't believe the truly large enterprises, and we're beginning to see this, would move the bulk of their mission critical applications and the data that sits behind it into the cloud. But there is also the idea that, the large monolith, inefficient mainframes that the banks still have doesn't allow for scalability, agility, innovation, and that really is what they are going to transition to the cloud over time at some point, and that does take a while. But I truly believe they will go at it and chip away gradually. So understanding the personas that deal with those pain points and really meeting them on their path to digitizing becomes key for companies like Twilio and for partners like Terazo. Understanding that journey of the enterprise and how they are going to transition to the cloud, and coming up with the tools, the emerging technologies, and the design thinking and all that, to help them on that path is critically important. Again, it's a data issue that we're faced with. Data is the new gold. How do you enable the customer to own their data, to drive their own decisions on that data, and to deliver on that data? I think if we have that at the back of our minds as we engage with the customer, I think we are up for success.
Chris, you bring up a really great point that I'm excited about, because pre-pandemic, right, the word on the street was digital transformation at all costs. And digital transformation is a super scary thing for a lot of people to wrap their head around. To them, it's 8 digits and spend. And then we have culture change. And then we have migrating our customers. And we have going from mainframe to cloud. And what you just reminded us of is that we don't have to do it all at once. The one thing that the pandemic taught us is, like, we can break it into increments and go fast. And therefore we mitigate risk and we build confidence at the same time. We all did that during the pandemic. We've proven that time and time again. And we think about from big mainframe run organizations having to go to cloud-based applications. It doesn't have to be all at once or all or nothing. We are able to take it into strategic increments and start that digital improvement process, no matter where you are in your roadmap. I think that's really important for customers to understand, our collective customers to understand, our business customers.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that incremental, that lift, how you get quickly time to market. I know that's one of the things we wanted to go into, but we do have a question from the audience that I'll post here, because I think it's a good segue, right? So, the question is, in any CDP customer data platform, it seems like the communications layer is both the starting point and the end point for that robust value delivering proposition, that platform. And it appears that Twilio is very uniquely positioned to marry the two, right? The data with segment, the APIs that are part and parcel of every Twilio product, and that communication layer to the CDP. I'm paraphrasing the question a bit. So I'd love to hear the panelists' thought from the question. So maybe Dan, you're kind of on the front lines of a lot of that. Just kind of, from, again, start to finish, kind of how does it all play there?
Yeah, I think, I'd modify that a little bit in the sense of, Twilio started as a CPaaS company, communications platform, right? But every great communication, every great conversation starts with listening, right? And so segment really allows you to listen, right? Here's all this data, make sense of the data, understand it, and then be like, great, now this is how we're going to now communicate, right? And so I think that's where kind of the two beautifully come together, where, in the past, it was really, really hard to listen. Now, I think, at least from a Twilio perspective, now we have the ability to have the ears as well as the mouth, or however you want to take the metaphor. Again, I'm falling into Rob Page's metaphor.
I think that's a great metaphor, right? Because you listen, right? And it's just so easy to listen. And with things like Twilio Intelligence, now we're able to listen to the customer speak to us as an enterprise the way that the customer wants to, and instead of just blasting things out, right? It's saying what the customer wants to hear, needs to hear, or is valuable, and isn't just throwaway kind of messaging, or just throwing a lot of spaghetti and hoping that you get 0.1% conversion at every phase of the funnel there, right? So I know we're coming up to the top of the hour here. I kind of pass it over to Chris from Twilio side just to see if you have any other questions for the panelists, or want to kind of tie a bow on the conversation as you've got a good overview of everything going on here.
Right. I think the one topic that we didn't necessarily touch upon that is important is around, who is Twilio Engage facing off with? Who are we, being considered alongside as the customers look to, innovate around their data? And I don't know if we have enough time to really delve into that, but I think that's an interesting conversation to have. Maybe we'll table that for another time.
I think it would be interesting to go deeper on that one for sure, because it deserves time for sure.
Absolutely. But I've really enjoyed this time, this conversation. There's a lot that we can really dig into. We've barely scratched the surface here, but nonetheless, hopefully the nuggets that we've thrown out there to everyone listening, hopefully that really brings an appreciation for the magic that is Twilio and the superpowers that Terazo bring to bear, and the opportunity that's ahead of us, and that we can truly collaborate together and begin to win and begin to delight our customers at the same time.
No, thank you for that. And I want to thank Rob and Dan for their time both being here today and the preparation work that we did ahead of this for this. Mike Blakeney, Amy, Miles and Trevor, and Gilberto. And maybe Gilberto, if you want to bring us home and let people know, because we're going to be posting this recording up, it's going to be shareable, kind of how people can take this conversation further.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Chris. Yes. And just as a reminder, everybody, and I also want to make a quick shout out to Trevor Dickerson from Terazo. He has not been shown online, but he has been our valuable AV and managing of QA and chat. So thank you, Trevor. As a matter of fact, Trevor will be working with myself. We're going to be making sure to get an email out to everybody. Post, obviously, this roundtable event. We'll have a link to the recording and obviously a landing page, maybe covering some of the higher level topics and kind of showcasing how we did the flow today. Maybe some of those cool takeaways, like Christopher's triple D, not diners, drive-ins, and dives, but democratization, decision points, and data. And we'll be talking about that. And we're going to also, to have a lot of the highlights on there for everybody to kind of capture and be able to utilize and leverage for their own valuable customer journeys. So again, thank you, Chris. Thank you for the entire team. And want to say, it looks like we're at 12:01. I didn't know, Chris B, if we had anything else to say. Otherwise, we can close out.
I'm good. I just want to thank everybody else who joined and listened, and for the Q&A and engagement. So don't ever hesitate to reach out to any of us. Thank you.
That's right. Thank you all very much. Y'all have a wonderful rest of your day.